In the 50s and 60s, it was a place where the desperate ended it all.
They rented a room, went up to the room, and then jumped out the window. And she ended up landing on a pedestrian who was walking by. The Cecil is like a metaphor for the city of Los Angeles and Hollywood. It's all facade, it's all glitz on the outside, and it's got this romantic, turbulent, sinister history.
The Cecil Hotel, a once luxurious destination for business travelers and tourists alike, has become this. A building as iconic as the dark and sinister stories that surrounded its 100-year history, from serial killer Richard Ramirez to the disappearance of Elisa Lam and countless other murders and suicides. We want to take you on a journey of what is possibly one of the most dangerous and haunted buildings in the United States, if not the world. So to understand the legend of the Cecil Hotel, let's start at the beginning and work our way forward to get the full picture. As always, the Rabbit Hole team has gone through extreme lengths to ensure all material is as accurate as possible, while consulting dozens of articles and documentaries. Specifically, the Netflix documentary Crime Scene: The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel, which was a huge help on the Elisa Lam story. With that said, viewer discretion is advised. Now, let's get into today's story of the Cecil Hotel. It's 1924 in beautiful Los Angeles, California. The words Hollywood have become synonymous with this city, and the iconic sign was built just 1 year prior. If you were a businessman, aspiring artist, or had dreams of fame, this is the place you had to be. With that in mind, three hotelers had the genius idea to build a brand new hotel with a gorgeous Art Deco style. So gorgeous in fact that the entire lobby was built out of marble, and even throughout the history of the hotel, the lobby has remained mostly unchanged. The hotel was constructed with a cost of $1.5 million and would officially open for business on December 20th, 1924, with the three hotelers investing in total about $2.5 million. But a few years later, one of the most devastating events would strike the world and completely destroy the Cecil's Hotel, becoming the crown jewel of Los Angeles and making it become something so much worse. And that event is the creation of the water pie, an absolutely scrumptious delicacy. Okay. I couldn't hold that one in. Seeing this dish and what it actually is really puts into perspective how hard this time period was for many people. The devastating event I'm actually referring to being the Great Depression. It was a complete economic shift led by the sharp decline in stock prices. This led to the stock market crash of October, often referred to as Black Tuesday. This caused severe unemployment and brought hardship to the area surrounding the Cecil Hotel. With the factory shut down, businesses closed, and so many out of jobs, the area became known as Skid Row, a 50-block radius where thousands of homeless people would gather since they had nowhere else to turn. It is said to be one of the poorest places in the entire world. This would mark the beginning of the downward spiral of the once prestigious hotel. With so much money invested in this place, an even worse decision was made. The room prices were lowered. This was a strategic attempt to attract more clientele, but ultimately it just led to an interesting crowd of people, to put it lightly, becoming a hotspot for junkies, runaways, and criminals. The Great Depression turned this beautiful establishment into a breeding ground for organized crime. Its history isn't the only thing that makes this building special. This hotel is most famous for its mysterious deaths, infamous guests, and suicides. It's as if this building was harboring something evil in and of itself, like it was drawing in people and driving them to do evil deeds. Don't get me wrong, I think ghosts are as interesting as the next guy, but I can't quite grasp how so much evil could come from one place. I mean, look at these strange facts. This hotel had higher than average amount of 911 calls, a higher than average deaths per year compared to other hotels, a lengthy history of unexplained suicides, and numerous first-hand accounts from employees. Now that you have a better understanding of how the Cecil declined, I want to ask you to ask yourself a few things. Why are there so many unexplained crimes? Is the Cecil Hotel haunted, or is something else at play? And what is causing all of these unexplained events? These next few stories might hold the answer. In September of 1944, 19-year-old Dorothy Jean Purcell and her boyfriend, 38-year-old Ben Levine, decided to get a room for the night. What Ben didn't know is that Dorothy was hiding a secret. Something that would completely change the dynamic of their relationship. While they were sleeping, she was awakened by a horrible pain in her stomach. Knowing she needed to keep the secret safe, Dorothy rushed to the communal bathroom outside of their room, careful as so not to wake Ben. As she is writhing in pain, holding her stomach, she knows something has to be done, but she must do it alone. She sits down, legs spread open, and gives birth to a beautiful baby boy all by herself. She's panicking because she knows she can't tell Ben the truth. Is it because it's not his baby, or is she feeling like she's too young to have a kid? There's no evidence, so one can only speculate. In an effort to hide the evidence that she had given birth, she runs out of the bathroom and finds the nearest window. She opens the window and proceeds to toss her newborn baby with all of her might. He flies through the air and lands on the roof of a nearby building. It is not known how authorities found out about the baby, but newspapers from 1944 claim the coroner ruled it homicide as the baby was alive with her falling 12 stories. Now, with that said, there are two different ways to look at this. Both terrible, mind you, but hear me out. Dorothy claims the baby was stillborn. This could explain how Ben wasn't aware that she was pregnant, as stillborn can happen before you start to show, based on your body size. So that could make sense, but since they charged her with murder, I feel I'm more inclined to go with the coroner's decision that the baby was alive. My question is, why did she feel the need to throw the baby out the window? What made her decide that was the best course of action? I mean, aren't there plenty of other options? Unfortunately, there is no known information of what became of Dorothy and Ben after this situation. Pigeon Goldie Osgood was an absolutely delightful elderly lady who was well loved in the community. Every day without failure, Goldie would take a stroll to Pershing Square. She would always wear a Dodgers cap and bring a big bag of birdseed with her. For hours, she would feed the pigeons and chase away the larger birds to make sure that small, weak, or sickly animals got a meal. I'm sure you can now see why her nickname was Pigeon Goldie. She would then chat up the locals before turning in for the evening to rinse and repeat the next day. Today, though, would be different, and within an hour of returning to her room, Pigeon Goldie Osgood would never get to feed another bird again. It is unknown if she was followed or if the perpetrator was waiting for her in the room so she had the same routine every day. Maybe someone was stalking her or waiting for the right time to strike. But what would happen next would be absolutely gruesome. A hotel worker was delivering phone books to all the rooms when he discovered the door was cracked open. He walks into the room and immediately called for help. The room was ransacked and Goldie looked as if she was strangled with one of the hotel's hand towels. To make matters worse, Goldie had been badly beaten and SA'd. Next to her body laid the birdseed and her iconic Dodgers cap. Hours later, a man named Jock B. Alinger would be seen walking through Pershing Square in blood-stained clothing. It was the only lead the police had. He was arrested and eventually charged with Osgood's murder, but he would later be cleared of the crime due to lack of evidence. There was a news article that came out around that time that speculated her murder could be connected to other women who were murdered around the same area. One was stabbed to death on May 16, 1964, and the other was stabbed to death on April 29, 1964. What stood out to me was serial killers have ritualistic tendencies, so why would Goldie be the only one that was strangled? Did the Cecil compel the murderer to do something different? How did the killer get out of the building unnoticed if he was covered in blood? Or was it someone else? Even 60 years later, these crimes remain unsolved, so we may never have an answer to who the true culprit was. Between April 1984 and August 1985, one of the most notorious serial killers in US history terrorized Los Angeles. His crimes would take place in the dead of night, coining him the nickname of the Night Stalker. His crimes range from burglary, essay, and murder, with 15 plus confirmed victims during his spree. We are talking about the one and only Richard Ramirez. During the height of his spree in 1985, a hotel clerk confirmed he stayed at the Cecil Hotel, which would later be confirmed by other guests who stayed there as well. With the Cecil now being a budget hotel, it was the perfect place for criminals to hide out and lay low. It was said on many occasions Ramirez would dump his bloody clothes in the trash can of the hotel alley and just walk barefoot in his bloodstained underwear up to his room repeatedly. I plan to make a full video on Richard Ramirez in the future, going way more in depth. So, for today's story, I want to tell you about the rather dramatic circumstances behind his capture later that same year. Thanks to the stories of him walking around in bloody underwear in the Cecil, we can see he was not the most careful of serial killers. He left distinct shoe prints at multiple crime scenes that police were able to identify based on sales records as the one and only black pair of Avia shoes in LA that were size 11.5. Not to mention, the victims who survived his attacks helped piece together his description. At one point, a key witness saw Ramirez driving a stolen car, which they were able to pull his fingerprint from when he dumped it. Ramirez had a long rap sheet that included many arrests for traffic and illegal drug violations, and with the recent installation of a new system to identify fingerprints, the police finally had the breakthrough they've been needing. And on August 29, 1985, LAPD decided to release a mugshot of Ramirez from a 1984 arrest to the media, famously saying, "We know who you are, and soon everyone else will. There will be no place you can hide," at the press conference. Literally overnight, Richard Ramirez had become the talk of the town, and it would be on August 31st, 1985 that he would meet his demise. The cops knew he had got around using Greyhound buses, so they camped at the station he would be at the night he returned from Arizona from visiting his brother. Ramirez was quick to spot the undercover police and was able to dodge them at the bus station. But he wasn't ready for what would happen next. He went to a nearby liquor store in East Los Angeles and picked up a newspaper. Oh yes, Richard Ramirez was front and center on every paper. The witnesses say he screamed and ran for his life. The chase was on. As Ramirez was being chased, he used every tactic he could to evade capture. But the people of LA had had enough, not giving in to his demands to steal their cars and fighting back. As the chase winded down, he entered a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood where he attempted to steal a car. The locals instantly recognized him and attacked to bring him down. 85-year-old Jose Burgoyne ran outside to join the fray, and Ramirez threatened to shoot him if he came closer. But again, no one was afraid. He was outnumbered. More neighbors banded together to help restrain Ramirez, but eventually he managed to escape their grasp. As he ran down the street with the group pursuing him, all he could hear were the neighbors calling out, "El Matador! El Matador!" which means the killer in Spanish. The chase continued, and just when he thought he had gotten away, he was hit in the head with a metal bar, which caused him to fall. The crowd pounced and beat Ramirez, restraining him until the cops arrived. all the while he's shouting, "It's me, it's me, it's me." Yeah, I wasn't kidding when I said his capture was dramatic, but just think about this. A serial killer was able to stay under the radar while performing some of the worst crimes in US history while staying at the Cecil. How did he dump his bloody clothes in the trash can of the hotel alley and walk around barefoot in his blood-stained underwear up to his room repeatedly without being caught? It just really makes you question what else was going on there that we will never know. In 1991, Johann Jack Unterweger was hired by an Austrian magazine to write about crime in Los Angeles. The primary objective was to understand the differences between US and European attitudes to prostitution. The best place to find this information was undoubtedly Skid Row, and Jack found himself staying at the Cecil Hotel. During his time in Los Angeles, he would befriend local police and participate in ride-alongs of the city's red light districts to get first-hand experience of prostitution in the US. Back home, Jack was renowned for his writing abilities, writing short stories, poems, plays, and an autobiography called Purgatory, which was later made into a documentary. This project, though, was a bit different from what he was used to, but Jack was excited to get out of Europe and come to the US. In Europe, every week a different woman was in the news because she was missing, only to be found days later, tortured and strangled to death. The US was a fresh start for Jack, as he was also escaping his past. In 1974, he murdered an 18-year-old West German woman by strangling her with their own bra. He would later be convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment in 1976, but was pardoned in 1990 due to his writing abilities. His work gained the attention of the Austrian literary elite, and it uses as evidence that he had been rehabilitated. Yeah, rehabilitated my ass. All of those murders in Europe, yeah, that was Jack. He wasn't looking for a fresh start. He was getting away before he got caught, since the Austrian police had him under surveillance. Except, he wasn't smart. As soon as he left Europe, the crimes stopped and then picked up immediately in the US in the same fashion. Knowing his MO and now having the evidence needed, they were able to track Jack down in Miami and arrest him on February 27, 1992. On May 27, 1992, Jack was extradited back to Austria and faced charges for 11 murders, which included a case in Prague and 3 in Los Angeles. The jury, by 6-2 majority, declared him guilty of 9 murders. Dr. Reinhard Haller, an Austrian psychiatrist, diagnosed Jack with narcissistic personality disorder following a psychiatric evaluation, and on June 29th, he received a life sentence without the chance of parole. That same night of his sentencing, Jack ended his life in his prison cell. He hanged himself using a makeshift rope crafted from shoelaces and a cord from his tracksuit trousers. Most interestingly, this is the same knot found on all the strangled victims. How is the Cecil tracking serial killers? Did the Cecil convince them to go out the same way the victims did? I mean, why else would you end your own life if you weren't guilty? Pretty damning evidence if you ask me. And now the most famous story of them all to come from the Cecil Hotel. Or at this time it was called Stay on Main. Oh yes, we are talking about Elisa Lam. A story that still puzzles many to this day. Was she murdered? Did she kill herself? Let's dive into the conspiracies behind this one. For simplicity, the Elisa Lam story goes like this. She was a 21-year-old Canadian student who wanted to take a trip by herself. She found a good deal for a trip to LA and stayed at the Cecil. The day she was supposed to check out, there was no trace of her. It's as if she completely vanished. That was January 31st, 2013. On February 13th, security cam footage was released of when she was last seen alive. Elisa was acting extremely erratic, looking as if she was running from someone, talking to someone, and even pressing multiple buttons in the elevator. Reports said she was on drugs, while others said she was having a psychotic episode from not taking her bipolar meds. After residents complained of low water pressure and it having a weird taste and being brown colored, a maintenance worker went to check out the situation. He discovered her body on February 19th in a water tank on the roof, in which he claims the hatch was wide open, suggesting she had opened, climbed in, all on her own doing. This story absolutely blew up. People couldn't believe that this petite Asian woman could open this hatch herself. Others just completely in disbelief that she would kill herself. But to make matters worse, there was supposedly a lapse in communication, and it was originally communicated to the public that the hatch was closed. With the way the water tank is built, it would be nearly impossible to open the hatch, jump in, and be able to close it yourself, which is why everyone was under the impression she had been murdered. This leads to some of the conspiracies. I say let's go over a couple. We'll start with the tuberculosis test subject. This one is purely coincidence, but so interesting and a bit unusual. On Reddit, there's a theory that she was involved in testing tuberculosis medication. A post on Reddit reads, "Following her discovery, there was a significant outbreak of a unique strain of drug-resistant TB in the same area where she vanished. TB is diagnosed using a Lamb ELISA test, and believe it or not, there was an outbreak of TB in 2013 in downtown LA Skid Row, and the test used was Lamb ELISA." This theory is discussed in the Netflix documentary I spoke about in the beginning. The hotel manager claims that the outbreak occurred at the hotel just days after ELISA was discovered, and guests were required to undergo testing. The documentary's theorists suggest that ELISA might have been a test subject who knew too much and was therefore eliminated. To round it all out, the university where ELISA Lam was studying has a prominent TB research center. These are absolutely insane coincidences. Next up is another widely held belief that ELISA Lam's death was foul play. This theory stems from several puzzling aspects of the case. Who was she signaling to in the elevator? Why did she appear so disoriented and frightened? Who was she hiding from in the elevator corner? How did she manage to get to the roof by herself? Given her small size, how could she have removed the water tank lid on her own? Why was she found unclothed? And most confusingly, how did she manage to replace the water tank lid after climbing in? These unanswered questions have led many to suspect foul play. There are numerous speculations about who might have harmed her, with reports suggesting that prior to her death, ELISA was seen entering the hotel with two men who handed her a small box. These men were never identified, and the box was traced back to the last bookstore, a place she visited on the day she was last seen alive. While this seems to solve one mystery, many still remain unconvinced. On Tumblr, she expressed a desire to meet new people and explore. Could she have encountered danger through someone she met online? With the area having a high crime rate, it's possible that she could have been kidnapped or met someone near the hotel who might have been involved in her death. The hotel also doubled as a residence for people unable to pay deposits, which in turn attracted criminals, fugitives, and ex-convicts with nowhere to go. This led to numerous security and safety issues with thousands of 911 calls. A detective described receiving at least 3 calls a day to respond to hell-on-earth situations at the hotel. Most interestingly, the case has also been linked to the plot of the movie Dark Water. In the film, a girl's body is discovered in a rooftop water tank after guests complain of dark, off-tasting water. Sound familiar? If you break down the movie to its most basic of elements, the plot is basically this real-life tragedy and story of ELISA Lam, which has led some to believe that someone was attempting to recreate the film's plot. With no signs of SA or drugs in her system, the most likely cause of death was accidental drowning. ELISA had bipolar 1, which in some cases can induce hallucinations. Based on trace amounts of her medication in her system and how much she had left in her prescription bottles, it's not unlikely to say she wasn't taking her meds. Which her family confirmed she would occasionally do back home, with even one instance being so bad she had to be hospitalized for her own safety. Even with all of this evidence and theories, I'm wondering, with how long her body was in the water, does that dilute the trace amounts of medication in her body? How is the security monitoring so bad at the Cecil if there is a history of incidents, especially in this modern age? Was this purely an accident or something more sinister? I'm not sure we'll ever know the true story of the end of what was Elisa Lam. We've now made it to present day, and believe it or not, with everything you just heard, the Cecil Hotel is still standing and in service, albeit in a different way. The property was sold to new owners, and it was decided that this company would fully revamp the interior and rectify all of the inconsistent work done in recent years. The hotel shut its doors in 2017 for the renovation, but COVID-19 pandemic indefinitely halted the work. Fast forward to 2021, the Cecil was to make a comeback as an affordable housing complex managed by the Skid Row Housing Trust, with the facility set to offer budget-friendly living arrangements for 600 low-income residents. But as of 2024, that promise has been left unfulfilled, with Skid Row Housing Trust collapsing. Most of the buildings they own left uninhabitable, with millions of dollars needed to revamp the properties. And so, the Cecil continues to sit in downtown LA, with many stories to tell in a past beacon of a completely different time period, surviving the highs and lows of the Great Depression, and leading to one of the most viral mysteries in modern time. Which begs me to ask you these questions. Is the Cecil evil? Is it the most haunted place in the world? Is it the most dangerous place still standing? I feel it's the area in failure to keep the promise of what Cecil was supposed to be. It was never meant to be a safe haven for, in this case, the less fortunate. It was supposed to be a business travel spot to relax and wind down after your day ended. But instead, it had to endure the Great Depression. With the downfall of the economy, it shifted gears and became a place it was never meant to be. Is it haunted or evil? I don't know. What I do know is it's just a building with legends and stories surrounding it. Some completely unexplainable, some that are circumstances of a real struggle in the world we don't usually see. People who are forgotten about and thrown away to live in the area known as Skid Row. So, what do you think? Give me your thoughts below and share any stories you have of the Cecil yourself. Thank you for watching, subscribe if you want more, and as always, try not to fall down another rabbit hole.